Without question, pre-construction and estimation is the time to lay the foundation for a successful project. So why is it so difficult to control costs once a project begins? Well, maybe we need some technology tools in our toolbox. To that end, we welcome to EBPowerCon Procore's Aaron Lober, who will discuss the application of technology to pre-construction and estimation. Aaron, welcome and thanks for joining me at EBPowerCon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be having the conversation. This is a topic area that I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm really happy to be here with you.
And that's why you're here because you bring that passion. So now, Aaron, before we get any deeper into the conversation, let's lay the groundwork, especially for me, so that I'm not making any assumptions. When we speak of pre-construction and by extension pre-construction costs, what sort of things are we referring to?
It's a good question. I don't think it's going to surprise anybody, but I think about pre-construction as sort of the collection of things that smart firms do before they break ground. And we sometimes talk about it as a phase of a construction project, like the period of time before we move into project execution. The truth is, though, for contractors, pre-construction is really both the work you do in collaboration with your partners to make sure that the project can be built as intended, and the work that you do to win new jobs while ensuring that those are profitable. So in that light, I spent a lot of time speaking with folks about things like takeoff and estimating, or planning and scheduling as a means of controlling predictability and profitability before you break ground, as well as things like constructability review or clash detection as part of the collaborative design process.
I like that predictability, constructability, all things that folks should be considering. And I like at the start of that how you said how the smart contractors will be undertaking and putting a lot of thought into pre-construction before they commence with groundbreaking or project execution.
Yeah, the takeoff and estimating piece in particular has been a really popular conversation recently since we released a solution for that's embedded within our platform. When contractors are really thinking about pre-con and associated costs, which I know is another really important thing to sort of define for folks. They really could be referring to like anything from what they're paying estimators to show up to do the work, to what it costs for the software that those estimators use to make sure that they don't end up underbidding work, and pretty much everything in between. And I've had that, the importance of making investments in pre-con and having the right tools. I've had that reflected to me all over the place. Like just recently, I was at World of Concrete in Las Vegas in late January, and many of the folks that I was having conversations with were really speaking about pre-con as this broader set of activities that was like the engine of their business growth. So those are always really fun because people are thinking about pre-con activities as not just things like estimating and bidding, but also a broader set of things like marketing or customer relationship management. These are all sorts of activities, right? So I guess uh, based on those conversations, I think a fun way to sort of break down pre-construction activities and costs into a couple buckets is to say, you could consider pre-con to be the things you do to win new work, the things you do to make sure that you make money from that work, and the things that you do to set up your project team for success.
I'm so glad you mentioned. I mean, I like everything you're saying so far, but I'm glad you mentioned that you're also you want to make sure that you're making money, because on day one of EB PowerCon we had some estimating experts sharing their tips and tricks, and one of the things they wanted to highlight is that profit is not a dirty word. You are in business to make profit, and so I'm glad that you're also emphasizing that amongst all these pre-construction activities and end results is you want to make sure you're making money so you stay solvent.
We're in the construction industry, hopefully because we're passionate about building. So it's not a undertaking we do for profit's sake purely, but without profit, you cannot keep the lights on and you don't get to continue to do this good work. So I'm totally on board. You know, pre-construction and investments in pre-construction, one way to frame the value certainly is in making sure that you do profitable work. There's a risk mitigation conversation in there somewhere.
Getting to those costs of pre-construction. Now, I've got some stats here. We included them in the session description. So pre-construction costs typically range between 1% and 3% of the total project value. Now, to me, even though they may sound like small, tiny numbers, to me, that's nothing to sneeze at. Because there's tight competition, there's tight margins. Uh, and poor planning and implementation can affect the outcome of the project well before you even set foot on site. And sometimes these issues can last throughout the course of the project and end up being much more costly than those initial projections. Now, Aaron, can you share with me, share with us some cases of the kinds of things that have gone wrong, right from the get-go, that have just plagued the contractor over the course of the entire project?
Uh, sure. How much time you got? No, no, seriously, that could be a very long list. Now, I'm obviously not going to name names here, but I've heard all sorts of stories from folks about mistakes made during pre-construction that can sort of hamstring project execution or project delivery. The really classic example, I guess, and we've been talking about estimating already, but the classic example is a specialty contractor who's trying to win a competitive bid for something like, let's just say, the electrical work on a hospital development. And there's obviously in that environment a lot of pressure to win the job. So the estimator, the project manager, is moving fast to estimate the cost of the work and get a bid response to the general. Now it's a competitive job, as we said, and margins are pretty tight. So you don't have to really miss by much for it to come back to haunt you. Now, in the worst case scenario, right, that estimator misses something expensive and then their company wins the job, but from day one, they're already underwater because the general is holding them accountable to that original quote. Now, maybe that's a little extreme, but like I said, you underestimate too far and you lose money. You overestimate too far and you won't win the work. So accuracy is pretty key. Now, that's one example. And there are other types of mistakes that may not show up as quickly or may not even show up until months down the line. But they can still put the specialty contractor into conflict with the general. So those are generally going to be things like misses in constructability review. Now, when that happens, that's probably going to involve a lot of finger pointing, a lot of sort of like, why didn't you catch this? But it's really bad for everyone. And if it's bad enough, it probably ends up in litigation, which, as we know, is terrible for everybody except the lawyers. Now, there are other examples too of things that can happen that are a lot more subtle, like slow or incomplete handoff between estimators or your pre-construction group and project managers or your construction execution or project team. Now, if those are slow enough, they can do things like creating delays in work, which can be a real problem. They can also result in things being lost in the handoff, which can be a big problem for the execution team. So that's a problem set where the consequences can be a little harder to quantify, but it's certainly still worth avoiding. But yeah, believe me, like you name it, it has happened at the beginning of a project or in that pre-construction phase to really do damage.
Now, to me, Aaron, it sounds like because you did mention accuracy in there as well. So it sounds like some of these issues could be dealt with ahead of time through the application of technology, as opposed to just relying on papers being shuffled, or perhaps even information that's embedded in someone's head, but only that person's head. So if we're talking about trying to digitize these processes, to take these paper only, headspace only information, make it accessible to numerous project stakeholders, uh, to me it sounds like a win-win. But maybe you can talk about some of the benefits of actually taking these things, digitizing them on some kind of platform.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, and the benefits are huge. I think this is probably a thing that our audience has heard said over and over again, but construction is still one of the least digitized sectors of the global economy. And that's after us making huge strides as an industry just over even the last 5 years. So there's a, there are a lot of benefits to digitization broadly speaking. Stakeholder alignment is certainly one of them. That'll get a lot easier on a platform or with a digital solution, as you alluded to. It's a lot easier to keep a big group on the same page or working together if you have a single system of record for them to keep everything in. Unfortunately, not everything is handled that easily over email, so it makes sense to have tools where people can collaborate together on say design coordination or takeoff and estimation or planning or scheduling, whatever that may be. I mean, you name it. Digitization also is going to allow you to eliminate or at least reduce a lot of repetitive tasks. Yeah, I like to think about how long it takes to say mark every light fixture in a 50-story skyscraper, right? That's just an insane amount of time. It would take your pre-construction team to do that manually. And digital tools now can allow you to apply artificial intelligence to assist you in that, to do things like automatically identifying and marking every light fixture in that building with, say, one click. What takes an estimator several hours to do could take a machine learning algorithm several seconds. So that's a big value of digitization. Now, like I say that, and not every digital solution has the same capabilities. Not everybody can do that. But that said, even if you're not a big construction platform that's got underlying AI functionality that's supporting you, any digital tool is generally going to be vastly superior to doing this work manually. I think that's fair to say. The last thing that really occurs to me that I think is a big benefit that we really shouldn't ignore of digitizing pre-con solutions is risk reduction. You mentioned, accuracy earlier, because I brought that up during this discussion of estimating, and accuracy is an important thing to achieve to reduce risk. And I know the people who are listening to us are probably thinking like, well, Aaron, risk reduction is a benefit of pre-construction tools. Full stop. It is what it is. And yeah, that's true. But the degree to which you're actually mitigating risks is totally dependent on your effectiveness, right? And I think it's worth letting that sort of sink in for a sec, right? If you're not effective with your pre-con processes, you're not going to mitigate risk, even if you're making an investment. So digital tools for pre-construction are gonna make your team more effective, and they're going to help you reduce the trade-offs between being accurate and moving fast. Now, like I don't know about I don't know about you, Anthony, but if my boss were to ask me to triple the amount of work that I'm putting out, which is not that crazy of a thing to ask out of a pre-construction team or an estimator. We want to grow. We need to win 3 times the work. If I got asked to do that, I would have to cut corners to get it done, and it makes it far more likely that I'm going to miss something as I go. And digital pre-construction tools can really act as a backstop to prevent things from getting by you. And that is really going to dramatically reduce the risk of things going wrong downstream.
No, definitely. People I speak with, and I'll be honest, I think a lot of them still need to fully grasp the notion of the benefits that would come with these kinds of solutions. You probably look at a lot of them and say, well, would you be able to now live without your Excel file or something? And well, at some point they must have moved some of their project data, the way they organize things from paper into Excel. So, okay, well, you've kind of taken that leap, but now you need to leap some more to start exploring, the cutting edge of solutions that are out there now to just raise your game that much more, be able to compete more effectively, hopefully miss fewer things. My goal and my hope with a session like this one, Aaron, is that people will watch this and say, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, and I should be investigating this more. And
Well
actually
said.
very soon we're going to get to an example with that, and actually segues quite nicely because that's coming up next. um, so Aaron, and you've probably heard this as well before, but when I talk about digitalization, when I talk to people about technology, especially those who have put their dipped their foot in the pool, and they're starting to swim with it, they all describe it as a journey. Now, Aaron, you had a conversation a couple months ago with Sebastian Grimard of Grimard, an electrical contractor in Quebec. He's the executive vice president there. And you had a conversation with him about Grimard's technology digitalization journey. Can you tell me a little bit about that discussion?
Yeah, of course. That was a really interesting conversation. Sebastian is a fascinating guy, and doing great things for his company. Uh, Grimard was really looking for a way that they could standardize and modernize their processes. Now they like to give a little bit of the history of that particular contractor. They've been a very successful family business for I think about 75 years now. So like there's a rich history in the way that they build. But I think Sebastian saw a window of time where his team could start training on some new tools without interrupting all their jobs in flight. And I think he saw Procore as an opportunity to make his team that much more efficient and data driven. So that's really what our conversation was about. It was about um, Sebastian and Grimard's journey of identifying their need to modernize, creating a plan for that, and then executing on it and seeing some pretty significant results. But I don't know. It might be worth just letting Sebastian sort of speak for himself there.
As fate would have it, Aaron, we have some clips from your conversation with Sebastian Grimard during Groundbreak last fall. So why don't we just cut to that clip right now?
I'd say our first challenge is complexity. We're involved into much more complex projects involving multiple stakeholders. Risk management and planning is more important than ever. We had to adapt project management techniques and processes. Not to say that we're welcoming new generations in the industry just like myself. So focus on our people is really important for Grimard. Change can be hard on people, very hard on people, and resistance to change is always there. My uncle is always saying, you got to put yourself in your people's shoes and ask yourself, what's in it for me? I'd say our second challenge is dependency on multiple stakeholders. This requires real-time communication. More agility is also needed. In this fast environment, you need good processes and standards. Otherwise, gaps are created, and bigger projects obviously lead to bigger risk. As for people, right now we feel that labor shortage is impacting our industry big time. I'd say another challenge, which may be even more actual in the construction industry, is very slow progression towards digitalization. By comparison, manufacturing made the move much earlier. It's always surprising that even some of the world's largest EPCM firms are still using paper and Excel spreadsheet to manage projects. Clients are demanding more details, they're lifting quality requirements, and all that for the same cost, obviously. This is putting a lot of pressure on our people, on engineering companies, construction companies, just like ourselves, system, and our people. I always envision working streamlined processes from within an integrated platform. At Grimard, we even developed an internal platform to document our processes mainly back in 2017. But then, March 2020 happened. Coronavirus hit us all. I'm telling you, Aaron, we had to make a split-second business decision that might impact our business in a big way. We either shut down the business during COVID or took opportunity to make a move and implement our platform with our people that just had their schedule free, basically. How many times have you had all of your key people with empty agenda? The answer is never. That never happens. And I hope this will never happen in the future. As I said earlier, Aaron, if we wanted to support our growth, the first step was to document our processes. As one once told me, we gotta stop reinventing the wheel. This wasn't really exciting to do and took a couple of years, but I believe this was the cornerstone from which continuous improvement can happen. This highlighted another challenge. This is really common for many small and medium businesses. Information lies in people's head. You then rely on a few key people with no backup. That's a big risk. On top of this challenge, I could also talk about these pain factors. Difficulty in transmitting information to the project, manual and paperwork, work in silos, no feedback from execution back to estimating. To fix these all at once, we're working from the very start of our business process, which is obviously estimating.
Yeah, it's so interesting to watch that clip again. Sebastian and I were working together to bring that presentation together and tell his story about half a year ago, little more, almost a year ago now. And at the time, I was really working to build my education around what matters in pre-construction, why estimating is so important, and I didn't yet have the full appreciation of how widespread some of these problems are. And since I've had so many conversations with other contractors who have come up to me and referenced this session and, like said, thank you for humanizing this and telling this story. So really fun to do, really interesting to watch the clip again.
No, and that's what I also really appreciated about that session you had with Sebastian is that it does take these problems and solutions and some of the things that are rolling around in pretty much everyone's minds and it humanizes them and it makes it a topic of conversation and it brings familiarity, understanding about these kinds of things. So that's what I appreciated. And I'm not ready to let Sebastian go yet or your session with Sebastian go just yet. Because also one of the things that stuck with me in watching that session is toward the end of the session, Sebastian he was saying that his journey he was upfront. He said it's not easy to undertake this journey, but it's definitely worth it. And he also had some advice for anyone looking to implement a pre-construction and estimating solution. So, by your leave, Aaron, I'd like to cut to that clip in your conversation with Sebastian.
We could discuss hours on lessons that we learn, but I know I don't have hours, so I'll be brief. In summary, first of all, define your business needs. Do not go with the flavor of the day. Second, have a dedicated team to support and coordinate this project. This team will also document process and methods as they go. Also, and this is important, don't neglect a good change management strategy. Training and support are mission critical. Another thing, don't bother to change everything just for the fun of it. What works is fine. Think about interfacing between new and legacy platforms when possible. Finally, I'd say, is it easy? Not at all. Is it worth it? Absolutely, and that's why we keep working on that, Aaron, and we will keep working on that later on.
Sebastian is a very well considered guy who I was able to learn quite a bit from. If I was going to synthesize, however, I'd say the core of his advice is essentially to be able to do these four things: to clearly define your needs up front, to create a plan for how you're going to manage change internally, right? Because that is going to be a major hurdle. Change in any organization is always going to be a hurdle, and it presents one of your or adoption risk is one of the largest risks you face when you're making a technology investment. Next, I think he's really advising folks to mitigate roadblocks as they arise. So do your best to tackle whatever comes up during your implementation, but to do that while staying flexible, not being so rigid that your team can't flex out to change its behavior a little bit if that's what's necessary to operate optimally. And finally, document everything. Document, both for posterity's sake, right? But also for future learning. I loved his advice of so much of this is about getting organizational knowledge out of people's heads and into a system of record. Like the truth is, this industry, like every other industry, is going to suffer turnover. And the labor shortage being what it is and having the impact that it is, and the older generation of team players maybe approaching retirement means the loss of that institutional knowledge is a real risk for companies. So document. His central insight to me, I guess, was that these processes that he's discussing, right? The processes that Grimard is looking to mature and up level a little bit, estimating specifically or pre-construction more broadly, are critical functions to your business. So any change you make has to be very well considered and very well planned. But if you're successful in implementing better tools to support those core processes, it's going to have an immediate and really dramatic impact to both your top line as you are able to grow the business, and your bottom line as you're able to get more efficient and more profitable. And that's ultimately what smart business leaders should be looking for every time.
So Aaron, we've heard from Sebastian Grimard. We've have some takeaways from Groundbreak regarding their journey, and it is ongoing. I don't think Sebastian at any point says we're completely done and on top of everything. So it is a journey. We've talked about the importance of getting tools that we really should explore tools, apply them to our businesses so that we can do better, be more nimble, get that institutional knowledge codified and others can access it. What I want to wrap up with is, how does one begin to shop for a solution? How do I look at my business, my processes, and say, I don't even know what I need. How do I shop for, how do I find a partner to help me?
That is a really good question. I think
There's probably a lot to that.
Yeah, there really is. If you want to chunk that up, right, you could take two separate tasks and you could ask the question, what does this system need to provide me with? What does the tool need to provide me with? What does the partner need to provide me with? So what makes a quality system and a quality partner? And then there's also the separate conversation of how do I go about selecting a partner. That's its own really interesting conversation to have. On the first point, I think one important factor in considering what makes a quality solution would maybe be the question of interoperability. Right. So is the system that I'm choosing, or is the tool that I'm choosing, going to play nicely with the rest of the tools that I use? Now, from the perspective of the wider market and the different technology solutions out there, Of course, we all know there are platform plays like Procore, and there are a myriad of point solutions, and different technology providers have taken different approaches or have different schools of thought around how they should approach interoperability. Some of our competitors have gone the route of closed ecosystems, restricted ecosystems, or even no open APIs, no partner integrations at all. That really has not been our approach. We have open APIs, and developers, in our contractor clients often write code to those APIs. Fortunately, we also have this large ecosystem of partner applications that have already done the work for you. So when you go to select, say, a accounting system, if you're a QuickBooks user, shall we say, we already have a pre-built QuickBooks integration into our financial software. That's an application of a partner writing to our open API. You really presented the question, like, how should folks go about choosing who they want to work with? And I'm a big proponent of leaning into social proof to help make a decision, right? I think finding social proof is really important when you're vetting another system. Every contractor listening to our conversation, right, would benefit from estimating more accurately and winning more bids, right? That it goes without saying. And technology companies know that, at least the good ones do. So most are sure, to promise you pretty amazing results. But the best way to cut through that noise is to listen to what your peers are saying. And like, I'm happy to be able to say that at this point, I've developed pretty close relationships with a handful of pre-construction business decision makers. And most of them start their technology search on sites like G2 or Trust Radius. Also, as a small aside and a little plug, I'm happy to say we're currently ranked the #1 solution in the takeoff and construction estimating categories. There is my shameless plug. But from there, that early vetting process, it's important to find and listen to the voices of your peers directly as well. So they if you do that, they can tell you what's real and what's just marketing. And I think for technology providers, reference selling is it's a very important part of the business model. It's certainly been a big part of our success. So if a technology company can't put you on the phone, say, with somebody who's doing business similarly to you, who can talk you through their success with the tools, that's probably a big red flag that they aren't actually delivering the value that they're purporting to. And I mean, I guess maybe now that I'm thinking about it, that also sort of dovetails into something that maybe I set up and didn't pay off that well, which is the idea of identifying not just a quality technology, but a quality partner. That's a really important part of your choice, right? Because adoption risk is a real risk. You're outlaying capital to try to get a return, but if your team can't use the tool, you're not going to see a return on that investment. So a really quality partner is one that's going to help you get that job done, whatever it takes. So when you're comparing software solutions, it's important to ask yourself, not just does this tool do the thing that I need it to do, but ask the question, and Sebastian certainly echoed this, how am I going to get this new tool implemented across my company, right? Or is the company who I'm partnering with providing my guys the training material that they need to really learn how to use this new system? That's another really important question. Or, are they sending people to my office to help train my staff? If the answer is no to any or all of these, like, you're probably not talking to the right partner. That's when you're at the greatest risk, is when you're just trying to get off the ground with a solution. You've got to get buy-in from your organization, and you really need a partner there to help train your folks, make sure you're hitting the right milestones. And I think the best technology companies in the space have seen that. They've made investments to build up professional services teams, customer success teams. I think that's becoming a best practice in the construction technology space, and I'm personally very happy to see that.
I'm glad I posed the question to you. I'm glad you had answers for the question, because I think it's important that, ideally we have sparked interest in this subject matter, in wanting to move forward with some sort of digitization and getting more accurate, getting things more out of people's heads, company wide, be able to move faster, be more nimble, and then to understand what someone should be looking for if they want a quality this or a quality that. It's good to know sort of, what if the bar is up here, then this is what we should be looking for. We shouldn't be looking all the way down here. So I'm glad you had all those examples of what makes a quality partner.
Yeah, my big philosophical learning about construction as an industry is that this is a people industry. Like, it's a people first, people second, people last. So every aspect of it has to have a certain amount of humanity, and I'm glad we could have the conversation about digitization, which may be dry in a fun way, but I hope it was enjoyable for our audience as well.
Very good. Thanks again, Aaron.